Mark Cavendish is a British professional road racer and is widely considered one of the greatest road sprinters of all time. In fact, in 2021, the director of the Tour de France, Christian Prudhomme, stated that Mark Cavendish is the greatest sprinter in the history of the Tour and of cycling. And today, two men have been jailed for robbing Mark Cavendish and his model wife Petter of high-value watches in a knifepoint raid which left them considering selling their home due to the continuing fear. Balaclava-wearing intruders broke into Cavendish's home in Essex as he slept upstairs with his wife, the trial at Chelmsford Crown Court was told. Two Mille watches, valued at £400,000 and £300,000, were among the items taken in the raid at around 2:30 in the morning on November the 27th, 2021. Romario Henry from South East London denied 2 counts of robbery but was found guilty after an earlier trial and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Ali Sesay's sidekick admitted 2 counts of robbery and was jailed for 12 years. The judge, David Turner Casey, sentenced the two men and he said this was a serious, organised crime. This was no run-of-the-mill domestic burglary by opportunist amateurs. This was planned. It was targeted. It was orchestrated, ruthless offending aimed at an internationally known sportsman and his wife who happened to be brand ambassadors for the exceptionally valuable Mille watches. It was previously told that intruders who smashed into the home were hunting for a blue sapphire watch. So guys, here's the video of the men walking in to Mark Cavendish's property. There's no audio to this, so it's going to be silent, so check this out. Mrs. Cavendish was crying at the sentencing and said the robbery had turned a loving family home into a constant reminder of threat and fear. Reading a victim personal impact statement from the witness box, she said they could potentially sell the property due to the continuing fear, but the current economic climate, this could cause considerable loss. She said she was in the early stages of pregnancy at the time of the robbery, and a time when she should have been happy and excited was then transformed into a period of stress and worry. The trial was told that Sesay's DNA was found on Mrs. Cavendish's phone, which was taken and found outside the property. So I'll go over that in a moment. And the charges were that the accused men robbed Cavendish of a watch, phone, and safe, and robbed his wife of a watch, phone, and a suitcase. So this is what happened. The trial was told that Cavendish and his wife were in bed with their 3-year-old in the early hours of the 27th of November 2021 when they were awoken by noises. The cyclist, who was recovering from injuries at the time, thought he could hear male voices and people walking around the house. His wife also heard the noises, so she went down to investigate, thinking that she could hear voices coming from the kitchen. She was then next aware of figures of people running towards her. She ran back up the stairs, shouting for her husband to get back into the bedroom. Cavendish then looked for a panic alarm and set it off the court heard. The jury was then told that some of the raiders then jumped on Cavendish and began punching him in an attempt to get him to turn the alarm off. The prosecutor said one produced a knife and threatened to stab him up in front of his children. It was at this point there were 3 in the room and they began asking where the watches were. There was a safe in a room and he was ordered to open it. However, the battery on the safe appeared to have gone flat and Cavendish told the group it was empty after a previous burglary. Meanwhile, his wife was keeping her 3-year-old son under the duvet to prevent him from seeing the ordeal in the bedroom, the court was told. She tried to use her phone to call the police, but one of the robbers grabbed it from her. The prosecutor said the assailants collected all the phones from the bedroom. At this point, Petter, his missus, was asked for the watch and Mark pointed to his watch on the windowsill. One of the intruders said, "That's not it," who added that it was a Mille piece valued at £400,000. This was the watch on the windowsill, and they said that's not it. And then his wife had another watch which was valued at £300,000, but both of these watches were taken. One of the group then came into the bedroom with a Louis Vuitton suitcase. They then ordered the gates to be opened and left, taking the phones, suitcases and watches with them, the court was told. Then one of the phones was dropped outside the property, which detectives examined for DNA evidence, and this was matched to Ali Sesay. So if the watches they took were not the ones that they wanted, what watch were they after? So Richard Mille, or as you probably heard on social media, Richard Mille watches, is a Swiss watchmaking brand beloved by big name celebrities and the super rich. During the Cavendish robbery case, it was revealed that the raiders had been after a blue sapphire watch, and it's understood they believe this luxury timepiece, which there's a version owned by Jay-Z, is worth around £2.6 million. But it was revealed that it had only been loaned to him because he's an ambassador for the firm, and he went to some event and he got pictured with that watch, and they probably thought that he owned it. Anyway, as I said, the watch was loaned and it weren't even there. So the prosecutor said that Henry had a previous conviction for supplying drugs in 2012 and for perverting the course of justice in 2013 by assisting in burning out a vehicle that had been used in a murder as part of a gang enterprise. The defence for Henry said the defendant's brother had been murdered 3.5 months before the robbery, and that had a significant bearing on the psychological makeup of the defendant. He said Mr. Henry had been on the verge of killing himself. The prosecution said that Sesay had admitted at an earlier hearing to 6 unrelated firearms offences over the possession of 2 guns and ammunition, which he had been prohibited by his sentence from possessing such items. The prosecutor said Sesay was arrested in South London and officers had to use a chainsaw to gain access and saw items later found to be firearms thrown over from a window to a neighbouring garden. So the judge jailed Sesay for 8 years for the firearms offences, consecutive to the 12-year prison sentence for the robbery, making a total of 20 years. The judge said Sesay had previous convictions, including for supply of cocaine and heroin in 2017. The defence for Sesay said the defendant was truly sorry for his role in the robbery and had admitted his involvement. Speaking about the firearms offences, the defence said Sesay claimed the guns were not his, but that he had thrown them from a window. They said the guns were loaded, but the cartridge wasn't in the firing chamber. Jurors were also told that 2 of the men, Joe Jobson and George Goddard, have been named as suspects in the robbery but have not been apprehended. I think they're both on the run. And there was another man, Oludeu Okorosobo, who denied 2 counts of robbery, and he was cleared by jurors after a trial. So guys, this is a new story coming in where 2 men who robbed the Olympic cyclist, Tour de France cyclist Mark Cavendish, and his wife of watches worth £700,000 have been jailed. Let me know what you think, guys. It's your boy GC. Keep it locked, keep it real.